The desert planet Cathara burned under twin suns. Red sand stretched across the horizon like an endless sea of fire. In the middle of this wasteland stood the great temple of the Velthani Empire. Black stone towers reached toward the sky like giant fingers. Strange blue flames danced on top of each tower. Captain Hansol stepped off the transport ship. The heat hit him like a wall. Sweat began to form on his forehead, but he did not complain. Behind him, his interpreter Mina pulled her coat tighter, around her shoulders. "Captain, are you sure about this meeting?" Mina asked. Her voice was quiet and worried. "The Velthani do not like humans very much." Hansol smiled and adjusted his blue diplomatic uniform. "We need those crystals, Mina. Earth's energy problem will not solve itself. If talking to angry aliens gets us what we need, then we talk." They walked toward the temple entrance. Velthani guards watched them with cold, yellow eyes. The aliens were tall and thin like walking sticks. Their skin was gray like old stone. Each guard carried a weapon that glowed with the same blue fire as the temple towers. The temple doors opened without a sound. Inside, the air was thick and hot. Blue flames burned in metal bowls along the walls. The flames made no smoke, but they filled the room with strange light. Hansol could feel the heat on his skin even from far away. "Follow the path," said a guard in broken human language. "Do not touch anything. Do not look at the sacred flames too long." Hansol and Mina walked down a long hallway. The walls were covered with pictures of Velthani warriors and priests. In every picture, blue flames surrounded the aliens like protective spirits. At the end of the hallway was a massive room with a high ceiling. High Priest Kethvar sat on a throne made of black stone. He was older than the guards, with white marks on his gray skin. Around him stood 12 other priests. They all wore long robes that seemed to move like liquid shadow. "So," Kethvar said in perfect human language, "Earth sends us mammals to beg for our sacred crystals." Hansol bowed politely. "We come to make a fair trade, High Priest. Earth has many things the Velthani Empire might find useful." The priest began to laugh. It was not a happy sound. It reminded Hansol of metal scraping against stone. "What could primitive mammals offer the chosen children of Velmoth?" asked one priest. "You have no god to guide you. You have no sacred fire to protect you. You are nothing but talking animals." Mina stepped forward. "Captain, maybe we should—" "No," Hansol said calmly. "We came here to talk, so we will talk." Kethvar stood up from his throne. "Very well, talking animal. Let us see what Earth considers valuable." Hansol opened his bag and pulled out several items. First was a small device that could purify water from any source. Second was a seed pod that could grow food in any soil. Third was a medical scanner that could detect illness before symptoms appeared. The priests looked at each item with bored expressions. "Toys," said Kethvar. "Children's toys. The sacred flames of Velmoth provide everything we need. We do not require the crude tools of mammals." He waved his hand toward the blue flames burning around the room. "These flames burn forever. They give us heat, light, and power. They cook our food and forge our weapons. Most importantly, they show us who is blessed by our God." Hansol looked at the flames with real interest. They were beautiful in a dangerous way. The blue fire seemed to dance and move like it was alive. He could feel the heat from where he stood, but something about the flames made him curious. "The fire is very hot," Hansol said. "How hot exactly?" The priests laughed again, louder this time. "Hot enough to turn your bones to dust, mammal," said Kethvar. "Hot enough to burn through metal like paper. Only those blessed by Velmoth can stand near the sacred flames without dying." Hansol nodded and took a step closer to examine one of the smaller flames. The heat increased immediately. He could see the air shimmering around the fire like water. "Fascinating," he said. "The flame burns without fuel. The energy signature is completely stable. This is incredible technology." "It is not technology," Kethvar shouted. His yellow eyes blazed with anger. "It is the divine power of Velmoth. To call it technology is blasphemy." Hansol took another step closer to the flame. Now he was only 3 feet away. The heat was intense, but not unbearable. He had worked in earth steel factories where temperatures reached similar levels. "Stop!" screamed one of the priests. "He approaches the sacred flame. This is forbidden." All 12 priests began to shout at once. Their voices echoed through the stone chamber like thunder. Guards rushed into the room with their weapons ready. Kethavar raised his hand for silence. When the noise stopped, his voice was cold as winter wind. "Foolish mammal. You have committed the greatest sin possible in our empire. To approach the sacred flames without permission is to mock Velmoth himself." Hansol looked around the room. Every alien face showed the same expression of horror and anger. Mina grabbed his arm and tried to pull him away from the flame. "Captain, please step back," she whispered. "We can apologize and—" "No apology can wash away this sin," Kethvar continued. "There is only one way to handle such blasphemy. Trial by the great flame." The other priests began to chant in their ancient language. The sound was deep and rhythmic like a funeral song. "What is the trial?" Hansol asked calmly. Kethvar smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "Tomorrow at dawn, you will enter the great flame in the center of our temple. If Velmoth finds you worthy, you will survive. If not, you will burn until nothing remains. And if I refuse, then you die now instead of tomorrow. Choose quickly, mammal." Hansol looked at Mina's frightened face. He looked at the angry priests. He looked at the beautiful, deadly blue flames dancing around the room. Then he straightened his shoulders and met Kethavar's gaze. "I accept the trial." The priests began to laugh once more. This time their laughter filled the entire temple like the sound of breaking glass. "Excellent," said Kethvar. "Tomorrow we will watch a talking animal burn. Perhaps that will teach other mammals to show proper respect to their betters." As the guards led them away to a holding chamber, Mina grabbed Hansol's arm again. "Captain, what have you done? That flame will kill you." Hansol smiled and patted her shoulder gently. "Maybe, Mina. Or maybe these priests are about to learn something new about talking animals." Outside the temple, the twin suns began to set. The red desert sand grew dark like dried blood. Inside the holding chamber, Hansol sat quietly and began to meditate. Tomorrow would bring either death or something much more interesting. The sacred flames burned on, waiting for dawn. The holding chamber was small and dark. Stone walls pressed in from all sides. A single blue flame burned in the corner, giving just enough light to see. Hansol sat on the floor with his legs crossed. His eyes were closed, and his breathing was slow and steady. Mina paced back and forth like a caged animal. "Captain, we have to find another way. There has to be something we can do." "There is," Hansol said without opening his eyes. "We can learn." "Learn what? How to burn alive?" Hansol opened his eyes and looked at her calmly. "Tell me about the flames, Mina. What do your translation files say about them?" Mina pulled out her datapad and began to read. "The Velthani call them sacred flames. They believe their god Velmoth created them as a test of faith. Only the pure can approach them. The flames burn at temperatures over 3,000 degrees. What else? The flames have burned for over 1,000 years without fuel. Scientists from other worlds have tried to study them, but the Velthani will not allow it. Some people think they are natural plasma formations. Others believe they are ancient technology." Hansol nodded slowly. "What about the trial itself? Has anyone ever survived?" Mina's face grew pale. "Captain, in the last 500 years, 37 people from different worlds have faced the trial. None survived. The flames consumed them completely." "Interesting. What species were they?" "Mostly humanoids, some reptilian species, a few energy beings. All dead within seconds of entering the flame." Hansol stood up and walked to the small flame in the corner. He held his hand near it, feeling the heat. "Tell me, Mina, what do you know about my grandmother?" "Your grandmother?" "Captain, this is not the time for family stories." "Humor me." Mina sighed. "She was from the old country, Korea, before the unification. She practiced traditional meditation and breathing techniques. She was more than that. She worked in the steel mills during the war. 12 hours a day next to furnaces that burned at 2,000 degrees. She taught me that heat is just energy, and energy can be controlled if you understand it. That was normal fire, Captain. This is something completely different. Han Sol smiled. Is it? Outside their chamber, the temple was busy with activity. Word of the humans' trial had spread across the planet. Ships arrived from every corner of the Velthani Empire. Diplomats from other worlds came to witness what they expected to be an execution. High Priest Kethvar stood in the great chamber where the trial would take place. This room was enormous, carved from solid rock. Thousands of seats rose up the walls like steps on a mountain. In the center of the floor was a platform made of black metal. Above the platform hung chains and pulleys used to lower prisoners into the Great Flame. But the Great Flame was not lit yet. Kethvar raised his staff and began to chant. Other priests joined their voices to his. The chanting grew louder and deeper until the stone walls themselves seemed to vibrate. Slowly, blue fire began to appear above the platform. The flame started small, no bigger than a candle. But it grew quickly. 5 feet tall, 10 feet, 15. Soon, it was a tower of blue fire that reached almost to the ceiling. The heat was so intense that even the priests had to step back. Dr. Jin Ho arrived on the last transport before dawn. He was Han Sol's old friend and the best scientist in the diplomatic corps. Mina met him at the temple entrance. Jin Ho, thank goodness you are here. Maybe you can talk sense into the captain. Dr. Jin Ho was a short man with thick glasses and gray hair. He carried several bags of equipment. I brought atmospheric scanners and thermal sensors. If I can analyze the flame, maybe we can find a weakness. They hurried to the holding chamber. Han Sol was still sitting in meditation pose, but now he was breathing in a strange pattern. 4 counts in, hold for 7, out for 8, over and over. Captain, Dr. Jin Ho said, I need to scan the Great Flame before the trial begins. Go ahead, Han Sol replied without moving. But be careful. The priests are watching everyone closely. Dr. Jin Ho and Mina left the chamber and made their way to the observation area above the great chamber. The room was filling with spectators, Velthani nobles in their finest robes, alien diplomats with recording devices, news reporters from across the galaxy. Dr. Jin Ho set up his equipment and began taking readings. What he saw made his hands shake. Mina, look at this, he whispered. The flame is not just plasma. There are exotic particles mixed with the fire, particles that should not exist in nature. What does that mean? It means the flame can destroy matter at the molecular level. Even if somehow the heat did not kill Han Sol, these particles would tear his body apart atom by atom. Mina felt sick. We have to stop this. How? The entire Velthani military is here. If we try to interfere, they will kill us all. Dawn came slowly to the desert planet. The twin suns rose above the horizon, painting the sky red and gold. In the great chamber, the massive flame danced and roared like a living creature. Kethvar entered wearing ceremonial robes covered in silver symbols. Behind him walked the 12 high priests. Their chanting filled the chamber with dark music. Citizens of the Empire, Kethvar announced, today we witness the judgment of Velmoth. A mammal from Earth has dared to approach our sacred flames. Now he will face the ultimate test. The crowd cheered and stamped their feet. The sound echoed off the stone walls like thunder. Guards brought Han Sol into the chamber. He wore his simple diplomatic uniform. His hands were not bound. His face showed no fear, only calm determination. Mina and Dr. Jin Ho watched from above. Mina had tears in her eyes. Dr. Jin Ho gripped his scanner so tightly his knuckles were white. Look at him, Dr. Jin Ho whispered. He is not afraid. How can he not be afraid? Because he is Han Sol, Mina replied. He never gives up even when he should. Kethvar raised his staff toward the great flame. Behold the fire of our God. Let all who watch remember this moment. Let them remember what happens to those who mock the divine power of the Velthani. The flame roared higher. The heat was so intense that spectators in the front rows had to move back. The very air seemed to burn. Han Solo walked calmly toward the platform. Each step brought him closer to what everyone believed was certain death. But his breathing remained steady. His grandmother's lessons echoed in his mind. Energy can be controlled. Heat is just energy. Fear is the enemy, not fire. He reached the edge of the platform and looked up at the towering inferno above him. Then, he turned to face Kethvar. "I am ready," he said simply. The chamber fell silent except for the roar of the flame. The great chamber held its breath. Thousands of eyes watched as Han Solo stood at the edge of the platform. Above him, the great flame roared like an angry beast. Blue fire twisted and danced, reaching almost to the stone ceiling 30 feet above. Kethvar raised his staff high. "Velmoth, judge this creature who dared to mock your sacred power. Show us your divine will." The flame seemed to respond to his words. It grew brighter and hotter. The air around the platform shimmered like water. Metal fixtures on the walls began to glow red from the heat. In the observation area, Dr. Jinho checked his instruments. The temperature just spiked to 4,000 degrees, he whispered to Mina. "The molecular disruption field is at maximum strength. Nothing can survive that." Mina could not speak. She watched her captain and friend prepare to walk into what looked like the mouth of hell itself. Han Solo closed his eyes and took 3 deep breaths. In his mind, he heard his grandmother's voice from long ago. "Heat is energy, Han Solo. Energy flows from one place to another. If you control your body, you can control how energy affects you. The mind is stronger than fire." He remembered working beside her in the steel mill. The furnaces there burned at 2,000 degrees. Workers had to wear special suits to get near them. But his grandmother would walk close to the furnaces wearing only her work clothes. Other workers thought she was crazy, but she never got burned. The secret, she had told him, is not to fight the heat. Accept it. Let it flow through you instead of into you. Become like water, and fire cannot hurt water that moves. Han Solo opened his eyes and looked directly at Kethvar. "Your God will judge me fairly. I have no fear of fair judgment." He stepped onto the platform. The heat hit him immediately. It was like standing inside an oven. His skin began to tingle, but he did not flinch. He continued his breathing pattern. 4 counts in, hold for 7, out for 8. The crowd began to murmur. Most had expected the human to burst into flames just from stepping near the platform. Instead, he stood calmly as if he was waiting for a bus. "Impossible," muttered one of the priests. "The heat should have killed him already." Kethvar's confident expression began to change. A small line appeared between his yellow eyes. Han Solo took another step forward. Now he was directly under the flame. The blue fire roared above him like a waterfall of pure energy. His diplomatic uniform should have been burning, but it remained untouched. "How is he doing that?" Dr. Jinho asked, staring at his readings. The temperature around him is 3,000 degrees, but his biosigns are normal. His body temperature has not changed at all. Mina leaned forward. "Look at his breathing. It is different from normal. Very controlled, very steady." In the crowd, alien diplomats began taking frantic notes. Some started recording everything with their devices. Others sent urgent messages to their homeworlds. This was not supposed to be possible. Han Solo looked up at the towering flame above him. It was beautiful in a terrible way. The blue fire moved like liquid light, flowing and dancing in patterns that seemed almost alive. He could feel the energy radiating from it, but somehow his body was not absorbing the heat in a dangerous way. He thought about his grandmother's lessons again. She had taught him that every person has a natural energy field around their body. Most people never learn to control this field, but with the right training, it could be strengthened and directed. "Energy flows where energy is needed," she used to say. "If you do not need the energy, it will flow past you instead of into you." Han Solo raised his foot and placed it directly into the base of the great flame. The crowd gasped as one voice. Several priests fell to their knees. Even the guards stepped backward, their weapons forgotten. The blue fire engulfed Han Solo's foot, but nothing happened. No burning, no screaming. The flame simply flowed around his boot like water around a stone. "This cannot be," Kethvar whispered. His staff shook in his hands. Han Solo smiled and stepped completely into the fire. The great flame surrounded him like a tornado of blue light. From the outside, all anyone could see was his dark silhouette inside the inferno. The heat was so intense that the metal platform began to glow white-hot. But Han Solo felt something completely different. Inside the flame, it was warm, but not burning. The fire flowed around him like a gentle wind. He could feel the energy of it, but his body seemed to be in harmony with that energy instead of fighting against it. He realized something amazing. The flame was not trying to hurt him. It was simply existing, being what it was meant to be. The burning and destruction happened when people fought against the fire instead of accepting it. His grandmother had been right. The mind was stronger than fire. Minutes passed. The crowd grew restless. Some people began to whisper prayers. Others demanded explanations that no one could give. Inside the flame, Han Solo began to understand something else. The fire was not natural, but it was not artificial either. It was something in between, ancient technology that worked with natural forces instead of against them. He could sense the exotic particles Dr. Jin-Ho had detected, but instead of tearing him apart, they seemed to recognize something in his bioelectric field, something that marked him as non-threatening. More minutes passed. The priest's chanting had stopped completely. Even Kethvar was staring in stunned silence. Then something wonderful happened. From inside the great flame came the sound of laughter. Not screaming. Not crying. Laughter. Han Solo was actually enjoying himself. The sound echoed through the great chamber like music. It was warm laughter, full of joy and wonder. It was the laugh of someone who had just discovered something amazing and beautiful. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some Velthani fell to the floor and began praying to their god. Others ran for the exits. In terror, the alien diplomats shouted questions that no one could answer. High Priest Kethvar stood frozen at his podium, his mouth hanging open. In all his years of serving Velmoth, he had never seen anything like this. Above in the observation area, Dr. Jin-Ho was frantically checking his equipment. "His vital signs are perfect," he told Mina. "Better than perfect. His stress levels are actually lower than they were before he entered the flame. It is like he is relaxing in there." Mina wiped tears from her eyes, but now they were tears of relief instead of fear. "I should have known. Han Solo always finds a way to surprise everyone." Inside the great flame, Han Solo continued to laugh. He had found something incredible. Not just a way to survive the fire, but a way to understand it. The flame was not a weapon or a test. It was a teacher, and it had just taught him that humans were far more amazing than even humans knew. The great flame burned on, and inside it a human smiled with pure happiness. 10 minutes passed inside the great flame, then 15, then 20. The great chamber had descended into complete chaos. Half the Velthani in the audience were on their knees, praying frantically to Velmoth. The other half stood in shocked silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. The alien diplomats were sending urgent messages to their governments. Emergency council meetings were being called on dozens of worlds. If a human could survive the sacred flames, everything they knew about the Velthani Empire would have to be reconsidered. High Priest Kethvar had not moved from his podium. His yellow eyes stared at the flame where Han Solo's silhouette could still be seen. The human was moving around inside the fire as if he was exploring a new room. "Master," whispered one of the younger priests, "what does this mean? How can a mammal survive the divine fire?" Kethvar did not answer. He could not answer. In all the holy texts and all the ancient stories, nothing like this had ever happened before. Dr. Jin-Ho continued monitoring his equipment. 25 minutes now, he reported to Mina. His heart rate is actually slower than normal. His brain activity shows he is in a meditative state. If I did not know better, I would say he is having the most relaxing experience of his life. Mina shook her head in amazement. That is Han Sol for you. Give him an impossible situation and he turns it into a vacation. Inside the great flame, Han Sol was indeed having an extraordinary experience. The fire no longer felt hot to him. Instead, it felt like warm sunlight on a perfect spring day. The exotic particles that should have destroyed him were flowing through his body like a gentle massage. He began to understand how the flame worked. It was not just fire. It was a complex energy system that responded to the bioelectric fields of living creatures. Most beings fought against the energy, which caused the system to react defensively. But if someone could harmonize with the energy instead of fighting it, the flame became something completely different. His grandmother's meditation techniques had taught him to control his bioelectric field without even knowing it. The breathing patterns, the mental focus, the acceptance of energy flow, it all worked together to create harmony instead of conflict. But there was something else, something even more amazing. The flame was conscious. Not conscious like a person or animal, but aware in its own way. It could sense intentions and emotions. It could tell the difference between someone who came with respect and someone who came with violence or fear. Han Sol realized that the flame had never been meant as a weapon or a test of worthiness. It was meant to be a teacher and a guide. The Velthani had forgotten its true purpose over the centuries, turning it into a tool of religious control instead of understanding. He decided it was time to share this discovery with everyone. Han Sol walked to the edge of the flame and stepped out. The great chamber fell silent immediately. Everyone stared at the human who had just emerged from certain death. His diplomatic uniform was perfect, not even wrinkled. His hair was neat and tidy. Most shocking of all, he was smiling the biggest smile anyone had ever seen. He looked completely refreshed, like someone who had just enjoyed a wonderful vacation. "Thank you," Han Sol said, bowing politely to the stunned crowd. "That was the most educational experience I have had in years." He turned to Kethvar, who was still frozen at his podium. "High Priest, your god has quite a sense of humor, and remarkable wisdom." Kethvar found his voice at last, though it came out as a croak. What are you?" "I am a human," Han Sol replied simply. "A species that has learned to adapt to almost anything. We evolved on a planet with extreme temperatures, violent storms, and every kind of danger you can imagine. We learned to survive by working with forces instead of fighting against them. But the sacred flame burns at 4,000 degrees. It has exotic particles that destroy matter itself." Han Sol nodded. "Yes, it does. It is quite impressive. But it is also something else. It is a teacher." He gestured toward the still burning flame. "Your ancestors created this not as a weapon, but as a way to help people understand energy and consciousness. Over time, you forgot its true purpose. You turned it into a tool of fear instead of learning." One of the younger priests stood up. "Are you saying our God is not real?" "Not at all," Han Sol replied. "I am saying your God is much more wonderful than you realized. The flame did not try to kill me because I did not come here to mock or destroy. I came to learn and understand. The flame recognized that and welcomed me." Kethvar's staff clattered to the floor. "This is impossible. You are just a mammal, a primitive creature from a backward world." Han Sol's smile became even brighter. "That is where you are wrong, my friend. Humans are not primitive. We are adaptive. We survived ice ages and meteor impacts. We learned to make fire from nothing and build cities in deserts. We went from living in caves to traveling between stars in just a few thousand years." He walked closer to Kethvar. "Most importantly, we learned that the greatest strength is not the ability to destroy, but the ability to understand and adapt." Dr. Jinho and Mina hurried down from the observation area. Mina threw her arms around Han Sol in relief. "Captain, I thought you were dead for sure." "Not dead," Han Sol laughed. "Just learning something amazing about the universe." Dr. Jinho was checking his readings frantically. "Captain, according to my instruments, the flame changed while you were inside it. The energy output decreased by 30% and the exotic particle field became more stable. Because it was not fighting anymore, Hansol explained. It was teaching instead of defending itself. Around the great chamber, Velthani citizens were talking in excited whispers. Some were angry, demanding that the human be executed anyway. But others were asking questions, wondering what else they might have misunderstood about their own religion. Kethvar picked up his staff with shaking hands. If what you say is true, then everything we have believed for 1,000 years is wrong. Not wrong, Hansol corrected gently. Incomplete. Your ancestors had great wisdom. They created something beautiful and powerful. You just forgot how to use it properly. He looked around the chamber at all the confused and frightened faces. Have a proposal, he announced. Instead of fighting about who is right and who is wrong, why do we not learn together? Humans have experience with extreme environments and energy adaptation. Velthani have ancient knowledge about consciousness and spiritual technology. Together, we might discover things that neither of us could find alone. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some Velthani were outraged at the suggestion that they could learn anything from mammals. Others were curious about what other secrets their ancestors might have hidden. But High Priest Kethvar raised his staff for silence. When the noise died down, he looked directly at Hansol. Human, he said slowly. You have done something today that should have been impossible. You have made me question everything I thought I knew about the universe. He paused, struggling with words that had never been spoken by a Velthani high priest before. Perhaps, he said finally, it is time for this old priest to become a student. Again, Hansol bowed respectfully. The best teachers are always willing to learn, High Priest, and the best students are willing to teach. The great flame continued to burn behind them, but now its light seemed different, warmer, more welcoming, and, for the first time in 1,000 years, it looked like what it had always been meant to be. A beacon of wisdom, not a weapon of fear. 3 hours after Hansol emerged from the great flame, the temple was still in chaos. News of the impossible event had spread across the planet and beyond. Emergency sessions were being called in government buildings throughout the Velthani Empire. In a private chamber behind the main temple, Hansol sat with High Priest Kethvar, Dr. Jinho, and Mina. The massive stone room was lit by several small sacred flames, but now their light seemed peaceful instead of threatening. Kethvar looked older than he had that morning. The events had shaken him deeply. Human Hansol, I must ask you directly, are you some kind of divine being? Did your God send you to challenge ours? Hansol shook his head. I am just a person, High Priest. A person who was lucky enough to have a very wise grandmother. Tell me about this grandmother. Hansol smiled, remembering. Her name was Sunja. She lived through 3 wars and the Great Famine. She worked in factories where the heat could kill a person in minutes. But she learned something that saved her life many times. He stood up and walked to one of the sacred flames. Without hesitation, he held his hand close to it. The blue fire danced around his fingers without burning them. She learned that everything in the universe is energy, heat, light, sound, even thoughts and emotions. Energy always flows from one place to another. Most people try to block energy or fight against it. But grandmother taught me to guide energy instead. Dr. Jinho pulled out his scanner and took readings. Fascinating. Your bioelectric field is actually directing the heat away from your skin. You are not blocking it, you are redirecting it. Exactly, Hansol said. The sacred flames are not just fire. They are complex energy systems that respond to bioelectric patterns. When someone approaches with fear or aggression, the flames react defensively. But when someone approaches with respect and understanding, they become teachers. Kethvar stood up slowly. You are saying that our ancestors designed the flames to work with people, not against them. I believe so. Think about it, High Priest. Why would a loving God create something that only destroys? It makes more sense that the flames were meant to help people grow and learn. Mina had been quiet during this conversation, but now she spoke up. Captain, there is something I need to tell you. While you were in the flame, I received messages from Earth. The energy readings Dr. Jinho sent back have caused quite a stir. She handed him a datapad. The Earth Council wants to know if this technology could help solve our energy crisis. Clean, unlimited power that responds to human consciousness could change everything. Kethvar's expression darkened. So this was all a trick. You came here to steal our sacred technology. No, Hansol said firmly. We came here to trade for crystals. Everything else was an accident. But now that we understand what the flames really are, we have a choice to make. He turned to face the High Priest directly. We can fight over this discovery, or we can work together to understand it fully. Earth has thousands of years of experience with extreme environments and energy adaptation. Your people have ancient knowledge about consciousness and spiritual law, technology. Dr. Jinho nodded enthusiastically. Captain is right. My scans show that the flames are far more complex than we first thought. There are energy patterns here that our science cannot explain yet. We need Velthani knowledge to understand them completely. And we need human adaptability to use them safely, Kethvar admitted reluctantly. For 1,000 years, we have lost people to the flames because we forgot how to approach them properly. Hansol smiled. Then we help each other. Earth gets clean energy technology. The Velthani rediscover the true purpose of their sacred flames. Everyone benefits. It will not be that simple, Kethvar warned. Many of my people will see this as betrayal of our most sacred traditions. They will fight against any cooperation. With outsiders, then we start small, Hansol suggested. A few scientists and priests working together quietly. We learn what we can and prove that cooperation works better than conflict. Dr. Jinho was already making notes. I could set up a research station here. Bring in a small team of specialists who understand both energy physics and consciousness studies. And I could assign some of our younger priests to work with them, Kethvar said thoughtfully, the ones who are not so set in the old ways. Mina looked up from her datapad. There is one more thing, Captain. The Earth Council wants to know if other humans could learn to do what you did. Hansol considered this carefully. I think so, with proper training. Not everyone would have the natural ability, but humans are very adaptable. If we can learn to survive in space, we can probably learn to work with conscious energy fields. This could change everything, Dr. Jinho said excitedly. Not just for Earth and the Velthani, but for the entire galaxy. If we can teach people to harmonize with advanced energy systems instead of fighting them, imagine what becomes possible. Kethvar walked to the chamber's window and looked out at the desert landscape. For 1,000 years we have used the sacred flames to prove our superiority over other species. We told ourselves that only the chosen children of Velmoth could survive their touch. He turned back to the group. But today, a human not only survived, but thrived in our most sacred fire. Either our God has chosen a mammal over his own people, or we have been wrong about everything. Maybe both, Hansol said gently. Maybe your God is bigger than any one species. Maybe the divine includes everyone who seeks to understand and grow, a difficult concept for my people to accept. The best truths usually are. Kethvar was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke again. Human Hansol, you have given me much to think about, but I must ask you one more question. What are humans, truly? Not your history or your abilities, but what makes you who you are. Hansol thought about all the things he could say. He could talk about human courage or creativity or stubborn refusal to give up. He could mention their ability to adapt to any environment or their talent for finding hope in hopeless situations. But instead, he remembered his grandmother's words from long ago, when he was just a child afraid of the dark. Humans are the species that learned to make friends with fire, he said simply. We could have stayed afraid of it, but instead we learned to work with it. We used fire to cook food, stay warm, and light our way through darkness. He gestured toward the sacred flames dancing peacefully around the room. Today I made friends with a different kind of fire, one that burns with consciousness instead of just heat. And I think, if we are patient and respectful, we can teach others to do the same. Kethvar smiled for the first time since Han Sol had arrived on the planet. Perhaps that is what Velmoth has been waiting for all these centuries, not for us to worship the fire, but to befriend it. And perhaps, Han Sol replied, that is what humans do best. We turn obstacles into opportunities and enemies into allies. Outside the chamber, the twin suns were setting again. But unlike the night before, this sunset brought hope instead of fear. The sacred flames continued to burn, but now they burned with new purpose. In the days that followed, word of the human who walked through fire would spread to every corner of the galaxy. Some would call it a miracle. Others would demand scientific explanations. But those who were there, who saw Han Sol emerge from the great flame with joy in his eyes and wisdom in his heart, would remember something more important. They would remember that the universe was full of wonders waiting to be understood, and that the greatest discoveries came not from conquest, but from the courage to reach out and make friends with the impossible. The sacred flames burned on, no longer tools of judgment, but beacons of possibility. And somewhere in the warm desert night, the spirit of a wise grandmother smiled, knowing that her lessons about fire and friendship had helped change the galaxy forever.